Hi, guys. Today we're going to be talking about two more ways that the founding fathers had to respond to challenges facing the new nation. The first one was how they were going to deal with problems with the Native Americans, and the second one was going to deal with how are they going to deal with problems with some of the other countries that were causing us problems. So the first one had to do with troubles with natives. Now, what could possibly be the problem with the Native Americans? Well, the English came in, the British came, or the Americans came in and they settled on Native American land. And that was the biggest deal. They were basically pushing the Native Americans out of the region, and the Native Americans didn't like it. So George Washington tried to sign some peace treaties with the Native American tribes. The problem was that the American settlers ignored those peace treaties and moved into the Indian territories. They tried to clear the land to build farms and cut down trees and moved in and used their hunting ground. And the Native Americans didn't like it. So there were many violent encounters between the natives and the settlers. So George Washington is going to have to send in some troops to help out the settlers. And so in the process, the Native Americans are going to be forced to give up their land, especially in the Ohio Valley region. Now, not only was this a problem, but we were also having a problem with some of our other countries that surrounded us and who claim land around us. So the red is what was America at the time, or the United States. Now, Great Britain is going to own the pink. They're going to own northern Canada, and Spain is still going to claim all of the West and Florida. But both Spain and Britain began stirring up the Native Americans to turn against America. They were both kind of bitter, and they were worried that Spain was worried that we were going to encroach on their territory and try to take some of their territory from them. So they stirred up the Native Americans. And like I said, George tried to sign treaties. The American settlers ignored those treaties. And so George had to use the troops to take care of that. Now, another problem that we had was, again, with those foreign countries, Spain and Great Britain. Okay. So we're going to start out with problems in Europe. Now, one of the problems that we had in Europe was actually not with either one of those countries. It was actually with one of our allies who helped us in the Revolutionary War, and that was France. Now, France was an ally. An ally is a friend, so why would they be causing us problems? Well, here's what happened. After we won our Revolutionary War against Great Britain and we got our freedom, the French looked at that and said, hey, we don't like our king either. Maybe we should have a revolution and get rid of our king. So that's exactly what they did. They started fighting for independence from their king, Louis XVI. And originally, the Americans really supported their fight. Yeah, we did it. You guys can do it too. However, the Americans became divided by all the bloodshed because it was a very bloody, gory war. And eventually, the French won and they beheaded their king, got rid of him for good. But they got a little cocky because only a few years later, they decided that they were going to go to war with France or with England. So France declares war on England. And it's at this point that they say, you know what? We helped you with the Revolutionary War. It's time for you to come back and help us win against England. George says, I don't know if that's a really good idea. But France sends over an ambassador, and his name is Edmund Genet. And he's going to come and ask, or he's going to come to talk to George Washington about America helping France with the war. Well, he's supposed to have this meeting, but instead of going directly to see George Washington, he sails into Charleston, South Carolina, and then he moseys up to his meeting with George. Now, the reason he takes so long is because he's actually stopping all along the way to make friends with a lot of the American merchants who own ships along the coast, because here's what he wants them to do. He wants the American ships to go out, and anytime they see a British ship, to attack it and sink it and steal the goods that are on board. Because, of course, if you help get rid of those British ships, that's better for France. So he actually convinces a lot of American merchants to join in the fight and help France out. This is not good, though. So France is trying to get America to take sides. And George says, you know what, this is not a good idea, because if we take sides, we're going to make somebody mad. Either France is going to be mad at us because we take sides with England, or England's going to be mad at us because we take sides with France. So either way, it's not going to go well for us. So George Washington has this idea. He says, you know what? We need to isolate. Now, you guys who are in quarantine, you know exactly what that is. It means you separate yourself from everyone else so that you stick to by yourself. And that's exactly what he thought the United States should do. We need to stay in our own country and mind our own business and not worry about the affairs of all these other countries. So his idea was isolationism. We should stick to ourselves. Now, the problem was that that French ambassador, Genet, he had already convinced a lot of American merchants to help him with attacking Spanish ships. So George Washington had a problem. He was going to have to figure out how to stop Americans from helping the French, which would cause us problems with Great Britain. So he issued something called the Neutrality Proclamation. See how the base word is neutral, and neutral means not taking sides. We're staying neutral, we're staying out of it. So this Neutrality Proclamation of 1793 is actually going to tell Americans that anyone who gets involved in helping either side is going to get in trouble. They're going to be arrested for treason. So he's threatening legal action against any American providing assistance to any country at war. And this act is actually going to lead the United States in remaining neutral until the 20th century. So people are actually going to say, all right, George, we won't help either side. Now, so again, in our notes, George Washington signs the Neutrality Proclamation to keep Americans from helping other countries at war. But we're not finished yet. That was a problem with France. Now let's talk about problems with Great Britain. So we just won our war for independence and we are our own country. And Great Britain is still a little bitter about that. But now they're also fighting a war against France. So they're having some issues because they can't keep sailors on board their Royal Navy ships. The sailors keep leaving. They keep deserting. And of course, why would they do that? Well, the British sailors have low pay. They have harsh living conditions on board the ships and really harsh punishments if they complain or if they get in trouble. So they don't like being sailors, and so they're deserting. So Great Britain has this problem. They need more sailors. So what they start doing is impressing sailors, which means that they're going to stop the ship, any ship, and they're going to jump on board. And first, they're going to look for deserters. And any deserters they find, they're going to bring back on board their warship and force them back into service. Okay? But that's not all. They don't stop there. When they still don't have enough sailors, they're going to start getting on board American ships or going into American coastal towns and finding British-born citizens that maybe now live in America and impressing them into service because they feel like they're still British, they should help the British. George Washington does not agree with this because many of these people are Americans. So yes, maybe they were born in Great Britain, but now they've moved to America. They claim to be Americans. So he does not feel that it's fair that Great Britain is pressing them into working for the Royal Navy. So this is an example of a picture that was put into an old newspaper. So during wartime, the Navy forced unwilling individuals into service. Residents of seaports lived in fear of the press gangs that patrolled waterfronts and raided taverns, pouncing on deserters and idle mariners. Prints from the time show armed gangs kidnapping men in their beds or barging into weddings and hauling the groom out, much to the distress of the bride. So these press gangs were the ones who were going around finding deserters or British-born citizens that they could press into service on board the ships. Now, while this sounds kind of harsh and different, it actually went on for almost 20 years and in that time, 15,000 U.S. sailors were pressed into service for the British Crown. And so Washington had to do something about this, and he actually tried to stop it at one point, and it took 20 years for them to really do anything about it. But George is going to send a man named John Jay to England to try to create a peace treaty between America and Great Britain. Unfortunately, so Britain is impressing the American sailors, and unfortunately, John Jay is really not that good of a negotiator because although he is able to create some trade agreements, he doesn't end impressing. They don't even touch on the subject of impressing American sailors, which is why it ended up lasting for 20 years and also why it ended up leading to a war with Great Britain called the War of 1812, which we'll talk more about later.